Hello, and welcome to a cozy, sleepy Pokemon video. In tonight's video, we will explore interesting details about Dragon-type Pokemon, a typing that has represented power, rarity, and mastery since the very beginning of the franchise. From the original pseudo-legendary line that defined what it meant to be a dragon in Generation 1, to the legendary titans that shaped entire regions, to the competitive dominance and eventual balancing that came with Fairy type's introduction. Dragon types have remained some of the most iconic and beloved creatures across all 9 generations. Before we begin exploring each dragon, take a moment to leave a comment below. Tell us which Pokemon has always been your favorite, the one that feels like it belongs to your journey, and let us know what time it is where you are in the world right now. Whether it's late at night as you're winding down or early morning as your day takes shape, we'd love to know you're here with us. Dragonite has remained one of the most iconic Pokemon since Generation 1. Not just because it was the only fully evolved dragon type available in the original games, but because its entire evolutionary line represented something genuinely rare and difficult to obtain in the early days of the franchise. Dratini could only be found through fishing in the Safari Zone, or purchased at the Game Corner for an astronomical 2,100 coins, making it one of the most expensive and exclusive Pokemon a trainer could acquire. And even after obtaining one, the journey to Dragonite required patience, as Dratini evolved into Dragonair at level 30, and then into Dragonite at level 55, one of the highest evolution levels in the game. What makes this evolutionary line so fascinating is how dramatically the design shifts between stages, with Dratini presenting as a small serpentine creature with a white underbelly and perpetually curious expression. Dragonair transforming into an elegant sea serpent with crystalline wings on its head and neck. And then Dragonite breaking completely from this aesthetic to become a bulky, orange, Western-style dragon with small wings and a friendly face. This transformation puzzled many players, as the graceful, mystical quality of Dragonair seemed to vanish in favor of something that looked more like a cartoon mascot than a fearsome dragon. Though this design choice was intentional, reflecting Dragonite's Pokédex descriptions, which consistently emphasize its gentle, kind-hearted nature, despite its overwhelming power. Lance, the Dragon-type master and champion of the Indigo League, made Dragonite his signature Pokémon, and his level 62 Dragonite in Generation 1 became one of the most memorable battles in Pokémon history. A final test that showcased just how powerful a fully trained dragon could be. From a competitive standpoint, Dragonite's strength has remained consistent across generations due to its exceptional base stat total of 600, distributed as 91 HP, 134 attack, 95 defense, 100 special attack, 100 special defense, and 80 speed, making it a balanced offensive threat with enough bulk to survive hits and enough attack to devastate opponents. Its dragon and flying dual typing gave it only 2 weaknesses in the first generation, Ice and Dragon, though this also meant it was 4x weak to Ice-type moves, a vulnerability that has defined Dragonite's competitive usage throughout the years. What makes Dragonite especially interesting is its access to the hidden ability Multiscale, introduced in Generation 5, which reduces damage taken by 50% when Dragonite is at full HP, effectively giving it an extra layer of survivability that transforms it from a powerful attacker into a genuine setup threat. This ability works beautifully with Dragon Dance, a move that boosts both attack and speed by 1 stage, allowing Dragonite to survive an initial hit thanks to multi-scale, set up with Dragon Dance, and then sweep through opposing teams with powerful stab moves like Outrage or Extreme Speed. Extreme Speed, a priority move that Dragonite can learn through special event distributions or move tutors, became one of its most valuable tools, allowing it to bypass its somewhat middling speed stat and pick off weakened opponents before they could move. The debate between using Inner Focus, which prevents flinching, and Multiscale has largely been settled in Multiscale's favour in competitive play, though Inner Focus still sees use in formats where flinch-based strategies are more common. Dragonite's shiny form transforms its orange body into a vibrant green, with its wing membranes shifting to a teal colour, creating a palette that many fans consider one of the more distinctive shiny colorations in the franchise. While Dragonaire's shiny form changes its blue body to a soft pink, and its white wing orbs to a gentle gold, creating an ethereal appearance that some fans actually prefer to the original blue design. In the anime, Dragonite appeared through multiple memorable moments, perhaps most famously in the episode where Ash and friends visit Bill's lighthouse and witness a giant Dragonite emerging from the fog, a mysterious event that was never fully explained, and became one of the anime's enduring mysteries. Later, Iris in the Best Wishes series owned a Dragonite that struggled with obedience issues, reflecting the temperamental nature that Pokédex entries sometimes attribute to the species, despite its generally gentle reputation. The trading card game has featured Dragonite in numerous powerful cards, including the classic Dragonite from the Fossil set, which introduced the devastating Slam attack, and more recent iterations like Dragonite V-Star, which has continued the tradition of making Dragonite cards that are both competitively viable and artistically impressive. Decades after its debut in 1996, Dragonite remains a staple of competitive teams, a symbol of the dragon type's enduring appeal, and a reminder that the first pseudo-legendary set a standard that every generation has attempted to match, combining raw power with surprising gentleness, overwhelming strength with genuine warmth, and representing the idea that the most powerful creatures can also be the kindest. Salamence has remained one of the most iconic pseudo-legendary Pokémon since its introduction in Generation 3, not just because of its overwhelming offensive power, but because its evolutionary line tells one of the most compelling narratives in the entire franchise, a story about dreams, determination, and the sometimes violent transformation that comes from achieving what you've always wanted. Bagon, the first stage of this evolution, is a small blue dragon with an oversized head and a singular obsession with flight. And according to its Pokédex entries, Bagon spends its days leaping off cliffs and smashing its steel-hard head into boulders in desperate attempts to take to the sky, driven by an instinctive jealousy of flying Pokémon and a deep-seated belief that it was meant to soar. This constant trauma has made Bagon's skull incredibly thick and durable, a defensive adaptation born from failure. And the image of this small creature repeatedly throwing itself from heights in pursuit of an impossible dream creates a surprisingly melancholic foundation for what eventually becomes one of the most fearsome dragons in competitive play. When Bagon finally evolves into Shelgon at level 30, something unexpected happens. Rather than gaining wings, it encases itself in a thick, bone-like shell and becomes nearly immobile, transforming into what appears to be a cocoon stage, where the dragon's body undergoes a dramatic internal restructuring. The Pokédex describes Shelgon as waiting impatiently within its shell, its cells constantly in flux as they prepare for the final transformation. And during this stage, Shelgon is said to dream constantly about flying, visualizing its future form while locked in temporary stasis, making the eventual evolution into Salamence at level 50 feel genuinely earned, rather than simply mechanically triggered. Salamence itself is a magnificent sight, a quadrupedal dragon with bright red wings shaped like crescent moons. A design inspired by European dragons, but filtered through a distinctly aggressive aesthetic that emphasizes power over elegance. The crescent wing shape has been interpreted by fans as symbolizing dreams and wishes, connecting back to Bagan's endless yearning to fly, though it also serves a practical aerodynamic function in the Pokémon's lore, allowing Salamence to achieve incredible speeds when diving toward prey or enemies. What makes Salamence so fascinating from a mechanical perspective is how its design perfectly matches its competitive role. With base stats distributed as 95 HP, 135 attack, 80 defense, 110 special attack, 80 special defense, and 100 speed for a total of 600, the standard for pseudo-legendary Pokémon. That base 135 attack is particularly notable, because it ties Salamence with Rayquaza for the highest attack stat among dragon and flying types before Mega Evolution, making it an immediate physical threat in any battle format. Salamence's abilities further enhance its role as an offensive powerhouse, with Intimidate lowering the attack of opposing Pokémon when Salamence enters the field, giving it easier setup opportunities and making physical attackers less threatening, while its hidden ability Moxie boosts Salamence's attack by 1 stage every time it knocks out an opponent, creating a snowball effect where a successful Salamence sweep becomes increasingly unstoppable. Dragon Dance, the signature setup move that boosts both attack and speed, turned Salamence into one of the most feared sweepers in competitive play during Generations 3 and 4, as a single Dragon Dance could put it, in position to outspeed and overwhelm most teams, especially when combined with powerful stab moves like Outrage, Earthquake for coverage, and flying-type attacks like Aerial Ace or Roost for survivability. Mega Salamence, introduced in Generation 6, transformed an already threatening Pokémon into something genuinely overwhelming, changing its body structure so dramatically that its legs essentially merge with its wings, creating a sleek, aerodynamic form that looks more like a fighter jet than a traditional dragon. The mechanical changes to Mega Salamence were just as dramatic as the visual ones, with its stats redistributed to 95 HP, 145 attack, 130 defense, 120 special attack, 90 special defense, and 120 speed, significantly boosting its physical bulk and speed while maintaining offensive pressure. What made Mega Salamence truly exceptional was its ability Aerolate, which converted all normal-type moves into flying-type moves and boosted their power by 20%, meaning that moves like Double Edge and Return suddenly became incredibly powerful flying-type stab attacks with no drawback beyond recoil damage. This combination of improved stats, increased speed, better defense, and the ability to turn normal moves into boosted stab attacks made Mega Salamence so dominant that it was eventually banned from standard OU competitive play and relegated to Ubers the tier reserved for legendary Pokémon and the most unbalanced threats. Salamance's shiny form changes its blue body to a vibrant green and its red wings to a striking lime color, creating a palette that some fans prefer to the original, though the transformation is subtle enough that it doesn't radically alter the Pokémon's identity, the way some shiny forms do. In the anime, Salamence appeared most notably through May's coordinator rival Drew, though it was Trainer Licia's Salamence, nicknamed Ali, that got the most significant screen time during the Hoenn contest arc, showcasing how Salamence could be used for elegant aerial performances rather than pure battle dominance. The Pokédex entries for Salamence consistently emphasize its rage and aggression, describing how achieving its dream of flight made the Pokémon violent and temperamental, as though the joy of finally flying was mixed with anger over the years spent unable to do so, creating a creature that celebrates its power through destruction. From a competitive perspective, Salamence has remained relevant through multiple generations, adapting to new threats and mechanics while maintaining its core identity as a Dragon Dance sweeper. Though the introduction of Fairy-type Pokémon in Generation 6 added a new dimension of risk to using Salamence, as its Dragon and Flying typing gave it no resistance to Fairy attacks and made Pokémon like Azumarill and Clefable genuine threats. Even with these challenges, Salamence remains one of the most iconic pseudo-legendary Pokémon ever created. A creature that represents the price of ambition, the violence that can accompany achievement, and the idea that sometimes getting exactly what you want doesn't bring peace, but rather unleashes something powerful and uncontrollable into the world. Garchomp has remained one of the most iconic pseudo-legendary Pokémon since its introduction in Generation 4, not just because of its exceptional competitive viability, but because it became inseparably linked with Cynthia, the Sinnoh region champion who is widely considered one of the most challenging and memorable champion battles in the entire franchise. Cynthia's Garchomp appeared at level 62 in Diamond and Pearl, later boosted to level 66 in Platinum, and for many players, this became the moment they truly understood what a fully optimized Dragon type could do to an unprepared team. With its combination of speed, power, and perfect coverage moves, creating a genuine wall that forced players to strategize, rather than simply overpower. What makes Garchomp so fascinating from a design perspective is how it blends multiple inspirations into something that feels both organic and mechanical, drawing primarily from hammerhead sharks for its distinctive head shape and overall body structure, while simultaneously incorporating elements of jet fighters and stealth aircraft in its streamlined silhouette and blade-like appendages. The evolutionary line begins with Gible, a small blue landshark with an oversized mouth and an almost comically adorable appearance. A creature that lives in caves and ambushes prey by lunging from the sand, creating a foundation for what eventually becomes one of the most aerodynamic dragons in the franchise. Gible evolves into Gabite at level 24, gaining more pronounced fins and a sleeker body that hints at the speed to come, and then transforms into Garchomp at level 48, completing the journey from cave-dwelling ambush predator to supersonic apex hunter. From a competitive standpoint, Garchomp's dominance across multiple generations stems from a near-perfect combination of typing, stats, and move pool that made it versatile enough to fit into almost any team composition. Its ground and dragon dual typing gave it only 3 weaknesses before Generation 6, Ice, Dragon, and later Fairy, with Ice being a 4-core X weakness due to the type overlap, but the other weaknesses being manageable through careful play and proper team support. What made this typing especially valuable was the excellent offensive coverage it provided, with ground-type stab moves hitting electric, fire, poison, rock, and steel, types for super effective damage, while dragon-type stab moves provided neutral coverage against most targets and super effective damage against other dragon types. Garchomp's base stat total of 600 is distributed as 108 HP, 130 attack, 95 defense, 80 special attack, 85 special defense, and 102 speed. And that speed stat is particularly crucial because base 102 puts Garchomp just above the base 100 speed tier, where many powerful threats like Salamence and Charizard sit, allowing it to outspeed these Pokémon naturally without needing speed boosting items or moves. The ability options for Garchomp created interesting strategic decisions, with Sandveil raising its evasion during sandstorm weather, making it nearly impossible to hit consistently when Sandstorm was active, though this ability was banned in most competitive formats because evasion-based strategies were considered uncompetitive. The alternative ability, Rough Skin, deals damage to opponents when they make contact with Garchomp, turning the Pokémon into a threat even when taking physical hits. And this became the standard ability for competitive play, adding passive damage that could chip away at physical attackers over time. Garchomp's move pool allowed it to function as a physical sweeper, a bulky pivot, or a choice scarf revenge killer depending on team needs, with Swords Dance providing setup potential by doubling its attack stat. Earthquake serving as its most reliable stab move with perfect accuracy and widespread coverage, and Outrage delivering devastating dragon-type damage at the cost of locking Garchomp into the move for 2 to 3 turns. Dragonclaw offered a more controllable dragon-type option without the confusion drawback, though its lower base power made it less appealing for situations where Garchomp needed to eliminate threats quickly, while Dragon Rush provided higher power but suffered from unreliable 75% accuracy that made it a risky choice in competitive play. The introduction of Scale Shot in Generation 8 gave Garchomp a new tool that hit multiple times while boosting its speed, creating another potential sweeping strategy. Though by that point Garchomp had lost some of its dominance due to power creep and the introduction of Fairy-type Pokémon. Mega Garchomp, introduced in Generation 6, should have been a triumph for one of the franchise's most beloved pseudo-legendaries, but instead it became one of the most controversial Mega Evolutions ever created. Not because it was weak, but because the stat changes actively made Garchomp worse at its primary role. Mega Garchomp's stats shifted to 108 HP, 170 attack, 115 defense, 120 special attack, 95 special defense, and 92 speed, dramatically boosting its offensive power and bulk, but reducing its speed by 10 points, dropping it below the crucial base 100 speed tier, and making it slower than threats it previously outsped naturally. This speed reduction meant that Mega Garchomp, despite having significantly higher attack and better defenses, was actually less effective as a sweeper than regular Garchomp, unable to outpace opponents without Choice Scarf or speed-boosting moves. And this created the unusual situation where competitive players would often use Garchomp without Mega evolving it, or avoid using Garchomp entirely in favor of Pokémon whose Mega evolutions actually improved their performance. Garchomp's shiny form features a subtle but distinctive color shift, changing its blue body to a darker navy or purple-blue shade, while maintaining the red and gold accents, creating a palette that longtime fans can identify, but casual observers might miss entirely. A relatively understated shiny compared to more dramatic transformations, like shiny Rayquaza or shiny Charizard. In the anime, Garchomp appeared most prominently through Cynthia's partner, showcasing its power in multiple battles and reinforcing its reputation as a champion-level threat, while Ash himself temporarily owned a Guyball that struggled to learn Draco Meteor, providing comic relief while also demonstrating the species' potential. The trading card game has featured Garchomp in numerous powerful cards, including Garchomp LV6 from the Diamond and Pearl era, and more recent Garchomp 5 and VMAX cards that maintain the tradition of making this Pokémon a competitive threat across multiple formats. Garchomp's species classification as the Mac Pokémon references its incredible speed and aerodynamic design, with Pokédex entries describing how it can fly at speeds rivaling jet planes when it folds its body and dives, creating a sonic boom effect that adds to its intimidation factor. Decades after its Generation 4 debut, Garchomp remains a staple of competitive Pokémon, an OU mainstay that has adapted to new threats and mechanics while maintaining its core identity as a fast, powerful, versatile sweeper that rewards skilled play and punishes poor team composition, representing the ideal that pseudo-legendary Pokémon should be both accessible enough for casual players to appreciate and deep enough for competitive players to master. Rayquaza has remained one of the most iconic legendary Pokémon since its introduction in Generation 3, not just because it served as the mascot for Pokémon Emerald and the centerpiece of that game's narrative, but because it occupies a unique role in Hoenn's mythology as the mediator between Groudon and Kyogre, the ancient titans whose endless conflict over land and sea threatened to destroy the region, until Rayquaza descended from the ozone layer to restore balance. This peacekeeping role gave Rayquaza a distinct identity compared to other legendary trios, where typically the third member is simply another powerful entity rather than a force specifically designed to counteract the others. And the lore establishes that Rayquaza has been performing this function for millennia, living in the upper atmosphere and descending only when the weather duo's power grows too destructive. Design-wise, Rayquaza draws inspiration from multiple dragon mythologies, blending elements of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent deity from Mesoamerican culture, with traditional Chinese lung dragons that control weather and natural phenomena, creating a serpentine form that stretches to an impressive 23 feet in length and incorporates distinctive yellow patterns along its green body that resemble ancient tribal markings or circuit patterns. The small rudimentary arms and lack of true legs emphasize Rayquaza's aerial nature, as this is a dragon that exists primarily in flight, never truly landing except in the most dire circumstances, and its red-tipped appendages and fierce expression create an appearance that balances majesty with genuine menace. From a competitive standpoint, Rayquaza's base form is already exceptional, with stats distributed as 105 HP, 150 attack, 90 defense, 150 special attack, 90 special defense, and 115 speed for a total of 680, placing it among the most powerful legendary Pokémon and giving it the rare distinction of having perfectly equal attack and special attack stats at base 150. allowing it to function as either a physical or special attacker, depending on team needs. Its ability Airlock completely negates all weather effects while Rayquaza is on the field, nullifying the benefits that Groudon and Kyogre gain from their Drought and Drizzle abilities respectively, reinforcing Rayquaza's role as the Weather Trio's counter and creating interesting strategic implications in battles where weather control is crucial. What makes Rayquaza truly exceptional, however, is its Mega Evolution, which broke several established rules when it was introduced in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and created a Pokémon so powerful that it required the creation of an entirely new competitive tier to contain it. Mega Rayquaza is the only Mega Evolution in the franchise that does not require a Megastone to transform, instead requiring that Rayquaza knows the move Dragon Ascent, its signature Flying-type attack that deals devastating damage but lowers both of Rayquaza's defensive stats, creating a trade-off between immediate power and long-term survivability. This unique evolution method meant that Rayquaza could Mega Evolve while holding any item, allowing it to carry Life Orb for additional damage, Choice Band or Choice Scarf for specialized roles, or Leftovers for recovery, giving it flexibility that no other Mega Evolution possessed, and making it fundamentally more versatile than any comparable legendary Pokémon. Mega Rayquaza's stats increased to 105 HP, 180 attack, 100 defense, 180 special attack, 100 special defense, and 115 speed for a total of 780, matching the primal forms of Groudon and Kyogre and making it the highest base stat total of any Pokémon that is not in a primal or ultra form. Its ability changes to Delta Stream, which creates a new weather condition called Strong Winds that negates all super effective damage against flying-type Pokémon, meaning that Mega Rayquaza's 4x weakness to Ice-type moves is completely removed, and it takes neutral damage from Ice, Electric, and Rock attacks that would normally threaten flying types, effectively eliminating its most significant vulnerability. This combination of overwhelming stats, perfect offensive coverage with both physical and special options, the ability to hold any item, and immunity to its main weakness made Mega Rayquaza so dominant that it was immediately banned from Ubers, the tier that houses legendaries like Mewtwo, Dialga, and Arceus, and placed into a new tier called Anything Goes, where no bans exist and players can use any combination of Pokémon without restriction. In VGC 2016, when restricted legendary Pokémon were allowed in the official competitive format, Mega Rayquaza appeared on a significant percentage of teams, dominating the metagame and forcing players to build specifically around either using it or countering it, creating a format where Rayquaza's presence warped team construction at the highest levels of play. Rayquaza's shiny form is one of the most striking color changes in the entire franchise, transforming its vibrant green body to a deep obsidian black, and changing its yellow markings to red, creating a palette that exudes power and menace while maintaining the elegant serpentine design. In the Pokémon anime, Rayquaza appeared as the Destiny Deoxys movie, battling against the space virus Pokémon in a conflict that threatened the city below, showcasing its territorial nature and willingness to defend its domain against extraterrestrial threats, while later appearances in the main series reinforced its role as a protector of the atmosphere and mediator of natural disasters. The Delta episode in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire provided Rayquaza with its most developed story appearance, revealing that ancient civilizations worshipped it as a savior, and that it has been protecting the planet from meteorite impacts for thousands of years, adding layers of lore that transformed Rayquaza from simply a powerful legendary into a genuine protector deity with tangible responsibilities. Dragon Ascent itself is a powerful move with 120 base power and 100% accuracy, making it one of the most reliable high-power attacks in the game, despite the defensive drops. And the move's animation shows Rayquaza ascending into the atmosphere before diving down at incredible speed, reinforcing the visual identity of a dragon that attacks from the sky rather than the ground. Cultural. Impact-wise, Rayquaza has become one of the franchise's most recognizable legendary Pokémon, appearing in countless promotional materials, merchandise lines, and special distributions. While its status as potentially the single most powerful Pokémon in standard competitive play has made it a symbol of ultimate power, and the pinnacle of what Dragon-type legendary Pokémon can achieve when design, lore, and mechanics align perfectly. The Creation Trio represents some of the most ambitious world building in the entire Pokémon franchise, with Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina serving as the fundamental forces that shaped the Sinnoh region, and, according to the mythology established in Generation 4, the entire Pokémon universe itself. These three legendary dragons were born from Arceus, the original one, with each receiving dominion over a different aspect of reality, creating a cosmology that elevated Pokémon lore beyond simple monster collection into genuine creation mythology. Dialga embodies time itself, a dragon with the power to manipulate temporal flow, speed up or slow down the passage of moments, and theoretically travel to any point in history. And this immense responsibility is reflected in its steel and dragon dual typing, a combination that was completely unique to Dialga until later generations, and gave it exceptional defensive properties with only two weaknesses: fighting and ground. The steel typing makes perfect sense when considering that Dialga's design incorporates heavy metallic elements, with its body featuring armored plating, a chest piece that resembles a massive clock mechanism with a brilliant blue diamond embedded in the center, and an overall aesthetic that suggests both ancient deity and precisely engineered timepiece. Roar of Time, Dialga's signature move, deals devastating dragon-type damage with 150 base power and 90% accuracy, making it one of the strongest attacks in the game, though the move requires Dialga to recharge on the following turn, creating a strategic trade-off between immediate, overwhelming force and temporary vulnerability. When Dialga holds the Adamant Orb, a type-enhancing item specifically designed for it, both its Dragon-type and Steel-type moves receive a 20% power boost, making its already formidable attacks even more threatening, and reinforcing its role as a powerful special attacker with base 150 special attack. Palkia controls space itself, with the ability to warp dimensions, create distortions in physical reality, and theoretically exist in multiple locations simultaneously, and its water and dragon typing reflects its association with the spatial fabric that connects all things, as water flows through space and takes the shape of whatever contains it. Design-wise, Palkia features pearls embedded in its shoulders and a body structure that suggests both aquatic grace and draconic power, with its arms ending in distinctive spherical joints, and its overall silhouette appearing more streamlined and fluid than Dialga's heavily armored form. Spatial Rend, Palkia's signature move, is another 100 base power dragon-type attack with 95% accuracy. And what makes this move particularly interesting is its high critical hit ratio, giving it an increased chance to bypass defensive boosts and deal devastating damage, representing the idea that spatial distortions can find and exploit weaknesses in physical structure. The Lustrous Orb serves as Palkia's equivalent to Dialga's Adamant Orb, boosting the power of Water-type and Dragon-type moves by 20%, and making Palkia's Surf, Hydro Pump, and Spatial Rend attacks significantly more threatening. From a competitive standpoint, both Dialga and Palkia have seen extensive use in Uber's tier throughout multiple generations, with Dialga often functioning as a bulky special attacker or mixed attacker that can utilize its excellent defensive typing, while Palkia typically serves as a fast special sweeper that can break through defensive cores with its perfect neutral coverage between water and dragon-type moves. Though both struggled somewhat in formats where fairy-type Pokémon became common due to their shared dragon-type weakness. Giratina represents antimatter and distortion, a dragon so violent and destructive that Arceus banished it to the distortion world. An alternate dimension where the laws of physics operate differently and gravity functions in impossible directions, creating a realm of floating platforms, inverted waterfalls, and architectural elements that defy conventional spatial logic. Its ghost and dragon typing is completely unique to Giratina and gives it 3 immunities to normal type, fighting type, and ground type moves, making it exceptionally difficult to damage with certain team compositions and forcing opponents to rely on coverage moves or specific offensive typings. What makes Giratina especially fascinating is that it exists in 2 distinct forms, Altered Forme and Origin Forme, each with different stat distributions, abilities, and aesthetic presentations that reflect different aspects of its nature. Altered Forme Giratina, which appears when Giratina is in the normal world without the Grigia's Orb, has stats distributed as 150 HP, 100 attack, 120 defense, 100 special attack, 120 special defense, and 90 speed, creating a bulky defensive spread with exceptional HP and good defenses on both sides. And its ability Levitate grants immunity to ground-type moves, despite already being immune due to its ghost typing, making the ability somewhat redundant, but thematically appropriate. Origin Forme Giratina, which appears when it holds the Grigia's Orb or exists within the Distortion world, shifts its stats to 150 HP, 120 attack, 100 defense, 120 special attack, 100 special defense, and 90 speed, redistributing points from defense to attack, and maintaining special attack while transforming from a defensive wall into a more balanced offensive threat. And its ability changes to pressure, which forces opponents to use 2 PP for every move they execute, gradually draining their resources over extended battles. Shadow Force, Giratina's signature move, is a 2-turn ghost-type attack that causes Giratina to vanish on the first turn and strike on the second. Similar to Fly or Dig, and during the vanish phase, Giratina is immune to all attacks except specific moves like Swift, making it both an offensive tool and a defensive maneuver that can waste opponent turns or bait out predicted switches. The introduction of Pokémon Legends, Arceus brought origin forms for all 3 members of the Creation Trio, Though interestingly, these forms are different from the traditional origin form concept, instead representing ancient or primordial versions of the Pokémon, with altered designs that emphasize their mythological nature. Origin form Dialga in Legends. Arceus features a centaur-like body structure with its temporal diamond moved to its throat, creating a more bestial and primal appearance compared to its standard form. While Origin form Palkia adopts a similar quadrupedal stance with its spatial pearls repositioned, and its arms transforming into more prominent shoulder structures, giving both legendaries a design that feels ancient and unfamiliar compared to their modern incarnations. These origin formers maintain the same stats and types as their standard versions, but present visually distinct interpretations that suggest the Creation Trio's appearance has changed over millennia, either through natural evolution or through conscious choice to appear less threatening to the humans who now share their world. Competitively, Giratina has been one of the most consistently used legendary Pokémon in Uber's tier, with Origin Former typically preferred for its offensive pressure, and Altered Former occasionally seeing use as a defensive pivot or defog user, and its unique typing combined with excellent bulk made it a cornerstone of many Uber's teams throughout generations 4 through 8. The Creation Trio's cultural impact extends beyond competitive play, as they represent some of the most philosophically ambitious concepts in Pokémon lore, transforming a franchise primarily about collecting creatures into one that grapples with fundamental questions about time, space, reality, and the nature of existence itself, creating legendary Pokémon that feel genuinely legendary in scope and importance. The Tau Trio represents one of the most philosophically complex legendary groups in the entire Pokémon franchise, with Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem embodying fundamental concepts about belief, conviction, and the consequences of division that extend far beyond simple elemental themes. According to Uneva's ancient mythology, these 3 dragons were once a single legendary creature that helped twin heroes found the region thousands of years ago. But when the brothers began to argue about whether truth or ideals should guide humanity, the original dragon couldn't reconcile these opposing philosophies and split itself into 2 separate beings. Reshiram to side with the hero who valued truth, and Zekrom to side with the hero who valued ideals, leaving behind Kyurem as an empty husk, a frozen shell that represented everything lost when unity gave way to division. This creation story gives the Tau Trio a tragic foundation that elevates them beyond typical legendary Pokémon, transforming them into symbols of philosophical conflict and the price of choosing sides in debates that have no clear answer. Reshiram embodies truth, the pursuit of objective reality and facts, regardless of how uncomfortable or challenging those truths might be. And its fire and dragon typing reflects the passionate intensity required to seek truth without compromise, creating a pure white dragon whose design incorporates flowing elements that resemble both feathers and flames, giving it an angelic quality that suggests enlightenment and purity. The design features a long neck, wing-like arms that can fold into a less aggressive pose, and a tail that functions as a massive flame jet, creating an aesthetic that balances grace with devastating power. Blue Flare, Reshiram's signature move, is a 130 base power fire type attack with 85% accuracy that has a 20% chance to burn the target and the move's name references the hottest part of a flame, the blue core where combustion is most intense, reinforcing Reshiram's association with absolute truth that burns away deception. Turbo Blaze, Reshiram's ability, allows its moves to ignore abilities that would normally prevent or reduce damage, meaning that Pokemon with Flash Fire, Thick Fat, or Volt Absorb cannot use those abilities to neutralize Reshiram's attacks, creating a mechanical representation of Truth's ability to pierce through protective barriers and reach the core of any situation. Zekrom represents ideals, the pursuit of what should be, rather than what is, the belief in potential and vision even when current reality seems to contradict those dreams, and its electric and dragon typing, a combination that was completely unique to Zekrom when it was introduced in Generation 5, reflects the shocking power of conviction and the energy required to transform the world according to one's vision. Design-wise, Zekrom presents as a black dragon with mechanical elements, featuring a tail that resembles an electric generator or turbine, arms that end in clawed appendages with visible segmentation suggesting pistons or mechanical joints, and red eyes that glow with intensity, creating an appearance that merges organic dragon with industrial machinery in a way that suggests both ancient power and modern innovation. Bolt Strike, Zekrom's signature move, mirrors Blue Flare's structure, with 130 base power, 85% accuracy, and a 20% chance to inflict paralysis instead of burn, making it an electric-type attack of equal strength that trades the damage over time of burns for the speed reduction and potential immobilization of paralysis. Terravolt, Zekrom's ability, is functionally identical to Turbo Blaze, allowing Zekrom's moves to ignore defensive abilities like Lightning Rod, Motor Drive, or Levitate, ensuring that its attacks connect as intended regardless of the target's protective measures. What makes the relationship between Reshiram and Zekrom so fascinating is how perfectly balanced they are, both mechanically and thematically, with equivalent stats distributed as 100 HP, 120 attack, 100 defense, 150 special attack, 120 special defense, and 90 speed, giving them identical base stat totals of 680. But, with Reshiram typically functioning as a special fire attacker, and Zekrom as a physical electric attacker, despite both having high special attack. In the games, players encounter either Reshiram in Pokemon Black or Zekrom in Pokemon White, creating version exclusivity that forces players to choose which dragon represents their journey. With N, the enigmatic antagonist who believes Pokemon should be liberated from trainers, controlling the opposite dragon, reinforcing the theme that truth and ideals exist in constant opposition, and that choosing one means confronting the other. Kyurem exists as the empty shell left behind when the original dragon split, a broken creature of ice that wanders the giant chasm in Unova, and its dragon and ice typing creates a Pokemon with significant offensive potential, but also dramatic weaknesses, particularly a 4X vulnerability to Fairy-type moves that makes it challenging to use in formats where Fairy types are common. Kyurem's design emphasizes its incomplete nature, with a body that appears damaged or frozen over, one wing appearing broken or malformed, and ice constantly generating from its body as though it's trying to fill the emptiness inside itself with frozen matter, creating a visual presentation that feels genuinely tragic compared to the majestic completeness of Reshiram and Zekrom. Glaciate, Kyurem's signature move is a 65 base power Ice-type attack that hits all opponents in double battles and lowers their speed by 1 stage, creating a support-focused signature move, rather than the devastating attacks that Reshiram and Zekrom possess, further emphasizing Kyurem's incompleteness and its role as a diminished version of what it once was. What makes Kyurem truly unique, however, is its ability to temporarily fuse with either Reshiram or Zekrom using the DNA splicers, a key item that allows Kyurem to absorb the other dragon and create either Black Kyurem or White Kyurem, hybrid forms that attempt to restore some of the original dragon's power. Black Kyurem, created by fusing with Zekrom, shifts Kyurem's stats to 125 HP, 170 attack, 100 defense, 120 special attack, 90 special defense, and 95 speed, for a base stat total of 700, significantly boosting its physical attack, and creating a powerful physical sweeper that can use Freeze Shock, a 140 base power Ice-type physical attack that charges for 1 turn before striking with a 30% chance to paralyze. White Kyurem, created by fusing with Reshiram, redistributes stats to 125 HP, 120 attack, 90 defense, 170 special attack, 100 special defense, and 95 speed, also reaching base stat total 700 but emphasizing special attack instead, and it gains access to Iceburn, a 140 base power Ice-type special attack that also requires a charging turn and has a 30% chance to burn the target. From a competitive standpoint, both Black Kyurem and White Kyurem have seen use in Uber's tier, with their 700 base stat totals placing them among the most powerful legendary Pokémon, and their unique combination of Dragon and Ice typing providing excellent offensive coverage despite the defensive vulnerabilities. Regular Kyurem sits in a strange middle ground, not quite powerful enough for Ubers, but sometimes too strong for standard OU play, creating a Pokémon that represents incompleteness mechanically as well as thematically. The cultural impact of the Tau Trio extends beyond their individual strength, as they represent one of the franchise's most ambitious attempts to build mythology around philosophical concepts, rather than simply natural forces, creating legendary Pokémon that ask players to consider what they value more, objective truth or aspirational ideals, and whether the conflict between these concepts is truly irreconcilable. The absence of a third version for Generation 5 that would have featured the complete original dragon, often theorized to be called Pokémon Grey, has become one of the franchise's most discussed what-ifs, with fans speculating about what a fully restored dragon combining all three would look like, what its typing would be, and whether its existence would represent synthesis between truth and ideals, or simply overwhelming power that transcends philosophical debate. Even without this hypothetical complete form, the Tau Trio remains one of the most memorable legendary groups in the franchise. Dragons that represent not just elemental power, but fundamental questions about how we understand reality, pursue our visions, and live with the consequences of division. The introduction of Fairy type in Generation 6 devastated Hydreigon's competitive viability in a way that affected few other Pokémon as severely, as the new typing gave Hydreigon a 4x weakness to Fairy-type moves, while also making Dragon-type attacks completely ineffective against Fairy types, stripping away both offensive and defensive utility in a single mechanical change. Pokémon like Azumarill, Clefable, and later Tapu Fini could completely invalidate Hydreigon's presence, resisting its Dark-type stab moves while threatening to eliminate it, with Playrough or Moonblast, and this shift caused Hydreigon to drop from OU to UU, and eventually to rarely use Tears as players abandoned it in favor of pseudo-legendaries without such crippling weaknesses. Hydreigon's shiny form changes its black and blue color scheme to a vibrant teal and purple palette, creating one of the more distinctive shiny transformations among pseudo-legendary Pokémon, and giving it an almost toxic appearance that some fans prefer to the original darker colors. Despite its competitive struggles post-Generation 6, Hydreigon remains culturally significant as Generation 5's pseudo-legendary, and as an example of how dramatically type chart changes can affect even the most powerful Pokémon, representing both the peak of what Dark and Dragon typing could achieve and the sudden fall that comes when the metagame shifts fundamentally. Dragapult represents a completely different approach to Dark-themed dragons, introduced in Generation 8 as Galar's pseudo-legendary, with Dragon and Ghost typing, a combination that was unique to Dragapult and gave it only 5 weaknesses while providing 3 immunities to normal, fighting, and ground-type moves. The evolutionary line begins with Dreepy, a tiny ghostly dragon that resembles an extinct aquatic reptile, specifically inspired by Diplocaulus and other Paleozoic amphibians, creating a creature that exists as both a ghost of something long extinct and a living Pokémon in the present day. Dreepy evolves into Dracloak at level 50, at which point it begins carrying a Dreepy in the launcher on its head, a detail that raises fascinating questions about whether this is a separate Dreepy or part of Dracloak's own body. And Pokédex entries suggest that the Dreepy being carried actually enjoys being launched at high speeds, creating a symbiotic or possibly parasitic relationship. When Dracloak evolves into Dragapult at level 60, the design fully realizes its Stealth Bomber inspiration, with the Pokémon's body resembling a flying wing aircraft, and the horns on its head functioning as dual missile launchers that fire Dreepy projectiles at supersonic speeds. This design is both darkly humorous and genuinely creative, taking the concept of a ghost dragon and filtering it through modern military technology to create something that feels simultaneously ancient and futuristic. Dragon Darts, Dragapult's signature move, is a 50 base power dragon type attack that hits twice, targeting 2 different opponents in double battles, or hitting the same target twice in single battles. And the move's unique targeting creates interesting strategic possibilities, while also dealing consistent damage that bypasses abilities like Sturdy or items like Focus Sash. From a competitive standpoint, Dragapult became an immediate staple of Generation 8 OU tier, with base stats distributed as 88 HP, 120 attack, 75 defense, 100 special attack, 75 special defense, and 142 speed, making it the fastest pseudo-legendary Pokémon ever created and allowing it to outspeed nearly every non-choice Scarf threat in the metagame. That base 142 speed, combined with respectable offensive stats on both physical and special sides, gave Dragapult incredible versatility, allowing it to function as a physical attacker with Dragon Darts and Phantom Force, a special attacker with Draco Meteor and Shadow Ball, or even a mixed attacker that could adapt to whatever coverage its team needed. Dragapult's ability options created additional strategic depth, with Clear Body preventing stat drops from moves like Intimidate or Sticky Web, while Infiltrator allowed Dragapult to ignore screens, Substitute, and other protective barriers, making it particularly effective against stall teams. The competitive dominance of Dragapult throughout Generation 8 reflected everything a modern pseudo-legendary should be. Fast enough to threaten offensive teams, powerful enough to break defensive cores, versatile enough to fit multiple team archetypes, and uniquely designed enough to feel genuinely new rather than simply another dragon in the long tradition of 600 base stat total powerhouses, representing the evolution of pseudo-legendary design philosophy towards speed and flexibility, rather than pure bulk and overwhelming attack stats. Hydreigon has remained one of the most visually intimidating pseudo-legendary Pokémon since its introduction in Generation 5. Not just because of its brutal, three-headed design, inspired by the Hydra of Greek mythology and the Orochi of Japanese folklore, but because its evolutionary line tells a story of progressive violence and increasing destruction that culminates in a creature whose Pokédex entries consistently describe it as annihilating everything in its path. The journey begins with Deino, a small, dark and dragon-type Pokémon that is completely blind, relying entirely on biting and tackling to navigate its environment. And this blindness creates a creature that approaches the world with constant aggression because it cannot see what might threaten it, leading to a personality defined by suspicion and preemptive attacks. When Deino evolves into Zweilous at level 50, the situation becomes even more chaotic, as the Pokémon now possesses two heads that share one body, but have separate brains that do not cooperate, leading to constant conflict where the heads compete for food and frequently attack each other, creating an evolutionary stage that seems actively dysfunctional rather than improved. This contentious relationship between the heads means that Zweilous struggles with basic coordination, and Pokédex entries describe how the two heads will often fight over food until they have completely devoured everything in their territory, leaving nothing behind. The final evolution into Hydreigon occurs at level 64, making it tied for the latest non-trade evolution in the entire franchise alongside Volcarona, a level requirement so extreme that it tests player patience and makes obtaining a fully evolved Hydreigon feel genuinely earned, rather than simply grinding levels. Hydreigon's design resolves the conflict of Zweilous by adding a third head, though interestingly, the two heads that emerge from Hydreigon's arms are not fully functional brains, but rather extensions controlled by the main head, meaning that the three-headed appearance represents unified control rather than continued internal conflict. The Dark and Dragon typing creates a Pokémon with numerous resistances and only 3 weaknesses. Pre-Generation 6, Fighting, Bug, and Dragon, making Hydreigon a powerful special attacker with base stats distributed as 92 HP, 105 attack, 90 defense, 125 special attack, 90 special defense, and 98 speed for a total of 600. That base 125 special attack, combined with excellent coverage moves like Dark Pulse, Draco Meteor, Fire Blast, and Surf, made Hydreigon a genuine threat in Generation 5 competitive play, capable of breaking through defensive cores and eliminating threats with powerful special attacks backed by stab bonuses on both Dark and Dragon-type moves. Hydreigon's ability, Levitate, grants it immunity to ground-type moves despite not being a flying type, giving it additional defensive utility, and allowing it to switch into Earthquake-based attacks without taking damage. What makes Hydreigon's Pokédex entries particularly striking is how consistently they emphasize destruction and violence, describing it as a creature that views everything that moves as an enemy and attacks without hesitation, capable of laying waste to entire villages when it goes on a rampage, creating a pseudo-legendary whose lore emphasizes menace and terror, rather than the gentle strength often attributed to dragons like Dragonite, or the noble power of dragons like Garchomp. Goodra represents one of the most unusual pseudo-legendary Pokémon ever created. Not because it lacks power or fails to reach the standard 600 base stat total, but because its design philosophy emphasizes gentleness and approachability, rather than the intimidating presence typically associated with this exclusive category of Pokémon. Introduced in Generation 6 as Kalos's pseudo-legendary, Goodra is a pure dragon type in its original form, making it the only pseudo-legendary without a secondary typing until the introduction of its Hisuian variant, and this singular typing creates both strengths and weaknesses that define its competitive identity. The evolutionary line begins with Goomy, a small slug-like dragon type that Pokédex entries describe as the weakest dragon-type Pokémon in existence. A creature so soft and vulnerable that it must remain in damp, shaded areas to prevent its mucus-covered body from drying out, creating a foundation that seems antithetical to the power fantasy that pseudo-legendaries usually represent. Goomy evolves into Sliggoo at level 40, gaining size and bulk, but maintaining the slug aesthetic, with prominent eye stalks and continued emphasis on its gooey, amorphous body structure. What makes the evolution into Goodra particularly interesting is that Sliggoo requires a specific environmental condition to evolve. It must reach level 50 while rain is active in the battle environment. Whether from natural weather conditions in certain routes, or from moves like Rain Dance, creating an evolution requirement that demands player awareness and planning, rather than simply grinding levels. This rain requirement connects thematically to the species' need for moisture, and reinforces Goodra's identity as a creature fundamentally tied to water, despite being a pure dragon type. Goodra's base stats are distributed as 90 HP, 100 attack, 70 defense, 110 special attack, 150 special defense, and 80 speed, and that 150 special defense is the highest of any pseudo-legendary Pokémon, making Goodra exceptionally resilient against special attacks, while remaining vulnerable to physical moves due to its relatively low 70 defense, creating a defensive profile that requires careful team support and strategic switching. Its abilities provide interesting utility options, with Sap Sipper granting immunity to grass-type moves and boosting Goodra's attack by 1 stage when hit by grass attacks, turning a potential weakness into a setup opportunity, while Hydration heals all status conditions when Rain is active, synergizing with the Rain requirement for evolution, and making Goodra particularly effective on Rain-based teams, where it can absorb status moves without consequence. The hidden ability. Gooey reduces the speed of any Pokémon that makes physical contact with Goodra, creating a defensive mechanism that punishes physical attackers and gives Goodra's teammates opportunities to outspeed opponents that would normally move first. Pokédex entries consistently describe Goodra as friendly and affectionate, noting that it will hug trainers it likes, but that this affection can be problematic because its slime-covered body leaves everything it touches coated in goo. And one particularly charming detail establishes Goodra as the softest Pokémon in existence, a fact that reinforces its approachable nature despite being a fully evolved dragon type. Hisuian Goodra, introduced in Pokemon Legends Arceus, transforms the species by adding Steel type to its Dragon typing, and completely changing its design to incorporate a shell-like structure made of hardened metal rather than soft goo, creating a defensive variant that addresses original Goodra's physical defense weakness with base 100 defense, while maintaining the special bulk that defines the species. And this regional variant demonstrates how the same evolutionary line can adapt to different environments, with Hisuian Goodra developing metallic protection in response to Hisui's harsher climate and more aggressive predators. Kommo-o represents another unique take on pseudo-legendary design, introduced in Generation 7 as Alola's contribution to this exclusive category, with Dragon and Fighting dual typing, a combination that had never existed before, and created a Pokemon with a distinct identity separate from the Flying, Ground, or Dark secondary typings common among other pseudo-legendaries. The evolutionary line progresses from Jangmo-o, a small dinosaur-like dragon with scales that ring when struck, to Hakamo-o at level 35, which develops more pronounced scale armor and begins to resemble a warrior, and finally to Kommo-o at level 45, completing the transformation into a bipedal dragon covered in scales that function as both armor and musical instruments. The design inspiration draws heavily from various sources, including ankylosaurs for the armored appearance, Hawaiian warrior traditions for the combat stance and territorial nature, and the concept of scale mail armor used in ancient warfare, creating a Pokemon that feels both prehistoric and culturally grounded. What makes Kommo-o especially fascinating is how its scales serve multiple purposes, providing physical protection while also creating rhythmic clanging sounds when the Pokemon moves or attacks. And Pokédex entries describe how Kommo-o uses these sounds to communicate with others of its species, warn away intruders from its territory, and intimidate opponents before battle, transforming its armor into a percussion instrument that broadcasts its presence. Clanging Scales, Kommo-o's signature move, is a 110 base power dragon-type special attack that hits all adjacent opponents in double battles, but lowers Kommo-o's defense by 1 stage after use, creating a powerful offensive option that carries a significant drawback, forcing players to decide whether the immediate damage is worth the reduced physical bulk, and this risk-reward structure reinforces the idea that Kommo-o must choose between offensive aggression and defensive stability. Kommo-o's ability options provide defensive utility that helps mitigate some of its typing weaknesses, with Bulletproof granting immunity to ball and bomb-based moves like Shadow Ball, Focus Blast, and Sludge Bomb, effectively neutralizing several common special attacks, while Soundproof provides immunity to all sound-based moves, including Boom Burst, Hyper Voice, and Perish Song, and the hidden ability Overcoat protects against weather damage and powder moves like Spore or Sleep Powder. The Dragon fighting typing creates a Pokemon with numerous offensive advantages, as fighting type Stab moves hit Normal, Ice, Rock, Dark, and Steel. Types for super effective damage, providing excellent coverage that complements Dragon-type attacks, though this typing also creates significant vulnerabilities, particularly a 4-OX weakness to Fairy-type moves that can make Kommo-o extremely difficult to use in formats where Fairy types are common. In the Alola games, Totem Kommo-o serves as one of the final challenges players face, appearing as an oversized boss fight with stat boosts and ally support, creating a memorable battle that showcases the species' power and reinforces its role as the region's pseudo-legendary guardian. Latias and Latios, while not pseudo-legendary Pokémon themselves, deserve mention in any discussion of supportive dragon types because of their unique role as legendary twins, introduced in Generation 3, who combine psychic and dragon typing to create fast, versatile special attackers with distinct gender identities rare among legendary Pokémon. The Eonduo functions as complementary partners, with Latias having higher defensive stats and Latios emphasizing special offense, both sharing base stat totals of 600 but distributing those stats differently to create distinct battle roles. Both received Mega Evolutions in Generation 6, with Mega Latias and Mega Latios gaining increased stats and the ability Levitate, though their Mega forms saw limited competitive use compared to other Mega Legendary Pokémon. The Soldew held item, which boosts the special attack and special defense of Latias or Latios by 50% in older generations, was banned from competitive play for years because the boost was so substantial that it made both Pokémon over-centralizing threats, though later generations reduced the boost to only 20%, making it legal but less dominant. In the Pokémon Heroes movie, Latias played a central role in protecting Alto Mare from disaster, creating one of the more emotionally resonant legendary Pokémon stories in the anime, and establishing Latias and Latios as symbols of protection, partnership, and the bond between siblings who complement rather than compete with each other. Altaria has remained one of the most underappreciated dragon types since its introduction in Generation 3, not because it lacks power or interesting design elements, but because its base stat, total of 490 places, it well below the pseudo-legendary threshold, and its dragon and flying typing creates a 4AX ice weakness that makes it vulnerable to one of the most common coverage types in competitive play. The evolutionary line begins with Swablu, a small cloud-like bird with cotton wings that seems utterly disconnected from dragon typing, and the evolution into Altaria at level 35 maintains this soft, approachable aesthetic while gaining dragon-type classification, creating a Pokémon that looks more like a gentle sky spirit than a fearsome dragon. What makes Altaria so fascinating is how its design draws from the Peng, a massive bird from Chinese mythology that transforms from a fish into a creature so large it can block out the sun. And this mythological connection explains why a Pokémon that resembles fluffy clouds is classified as a dragon type, despite lacking the aggressive features typically associated with dragons. Mega Altaria, introduced in Generation 6, completely transformed the species by changing its typing to dragon and fairy, making it the only Pokémon with this unique type combination and granting it an entirely new competitive identity. This typing shift eliminated Altaria's ice weakness while creating new resistances, and only 3 weaknesses to poison, steel, and fairy, making Mega Altaria significantly more defensively viable than its base form. Mega Altaria's ability, Pixelate, converts all normal-type moves into fairy-type moves and boosts their power by 20%, meaning that moves like Return and Hyper Voice suddenly become powerful fairy-type stab attacks with no drawback. And this ability combined with base 110 special attack after Mega Evolution made Mega Altaria a genuine offensive threat, despite the species' historically defensive role. The base form's natural cure ability removes all status conditions when Altaria switches out of battle, giving it utility as a status absorber on teams that need to handle Toxic, Will-O-Wisp, or Thunder Wave without dedicating item slots to Lum Berry or using cleric support. Kingdra represents one of the most perfectly designed dragon types from a defensive typing perspective, combining Water and Dragon to create Pokémon that before the introduction of Fairy type in Generation 6 had literally no weaknesses in standard play, as its Water typing neutralized Dragon's weakness to Ice and Dragon, leaving it resistant to Fire, Water, and Steel, while having no super effective vulnerabilities at all. This defensive perfection made Kingdra an excellent choice for balanced teams that needed a Pokémon capable of switching into a wide variety of attacks without taking excessive damage, and its evolution method reinforces its rarity, as Seadra requires a Dragon Scale held item and a trade to evolve into Kingdra, making it one of the few dragon types locked behind both item acquisition and trading mechanics. Kingdra's abilities provide distinct strategic options, with Swift Swim doubling its speed during rain, transforming it from a relatively slow Pokémon with base 85 speed into a dangerous sweeper that can outpace most threats when weather support is available, while Sniper increases the damage of critical hits by an additional 50% beyond the normal critical multiplier, creating a niche strategy focused on moves with high critical hit ratios like Focus Energy or Scope Lens builds. From a competitive standpoint, Kingdra has consistently appeared in rain-based teams throughout multiple generations, using Swift Swim to become a fast special attacker, with Hydro Pump, Draco Meteor, and Ice Beam providing near-perfect coverage. Though its modest offensive stats, base 95 special attack, mean it relies heavily on rain-boosted water moves rather than raw power. The Dragon type has undergone one of the most dramatic evolutionary arcs in Pokémon's competitive and cultural history, beginning in Generation 1 as a symbol of extreme rarity and near-mythical power, before expanding into dominance and eventually being deliberately countered through fundamental game design changes. In the original Red and Blue games, only the Dratini evolutionary line existed as dragon types, making Dragon one of the rarest types in the game alongside Ghost, and this scarcity was entirely intentional, with Game Freak designing Dragon type to represent the pinnacle of what a Pokémon could be. Creatures so powerful and exceptional that encountering one should feel genuinely special. The type's offensive properties reinforce this power fantasy, as Dragon-type moves were only resisted by Steel, which didn't exist in Generation 1, meaning Dragon attacks hit almost everything for at least neutral damage, and the only Pokémon weak to Dragon-type moves were other Dragon types, creating a typing that functioned as both the ultimate sword and the only effective shield against itself. This self-contained power dynamic meant that having a Dragon type gave players access to a Pokémon that could threaten nearly any opponent, while only truly fearing other dragons, and the common Ice-type coverage moves that most teams carried specifically to counter Lance's Dragonite. As the generations progressed, Dragon types became more common, but maintained their association with power and prestige, with Generation 2 introducing no new pure Dragon evolutionary lines, but adding the Dragon Scale evolution item for Kingdra, Generation 3 bringing Salamence, Altaria, Flygon, and the legendary Weather Trio, Generation 4 introducing Garchomp and the Creation Trio, and Generation 5 adding Hydreigon and the Tau Trio, creating a steady expansion that made Dragon types more accessible while preserving their reputation as elite Pokémon. From a competitive standpoint, dragon types dominated the metagame throughout generations 3, 4, and 5, with teams often featuring multiple dragons because their offensive typing, high stats, and access to powerful moves like Dragon Dance, Outrage, and Draco Meteor made them exceptionally difficult to counter without dedicating specific team slots to dragon checks. Dragon Dance became the quintessential setup move for physical dragon types, boosting both attack and speed in a single turn, and transforming Pokémon like Salamence, Dragonite, and Gyarados into sweepers that could overwhelm entire teams after 1 or 2 boosts, while Draco Meteor served as the special equivalent, a 130 base power dragon-type move with 90% accuracy that guaranteed devastating damage at the cost of lowering special attack by 2 stages afterward. Outrage, the physical dragon-type nuke with 120 base power that locked the user into the move for 2 to 3 turns before causing confusion, represented raw power at the cost of control and the decision between using Outrage for maximum damage or Dragon Claw for consistent reliability became one of the defining strategic choices for physical dragon attackers. This competitive dominance created a metagame where dragon types appeared on almost every team, where matches often came down to which player could sweep with their dragon first, and where the phrase dragon spam became common terminology for strategies that relied on overwhelming opponents with multiple dragon-type threats. Game Freak recognized this centralization as a design problem, and the introduction of Fairy type in Generation 6 was specifically created to counter dragon types and restore balance to the competitive environment, giving the new type complete immunity to dragon-type moves while dealing super effective damage to dragons, dark types, and fighting types, fundamentally restructuring the metagame overnight. Flygon has become one of the most discussed dragon types in the community, not because of overwhelming competitive success, but because of what it represents as a beloved Pokémon that never received the mega evolution many fans believed it deserved, creating a sense of missed potential that has persisted across multiple generations. The evolutionary line transforms Trapinch, a stationary ground-dwelling antlion larva, into Vibrava at level 35, gaining dragon and flying types while becoming a graceful dragonfly, and then into Flygon at level 45, completing the transformation into what fans nicknamed the Spirit of the Desert, a dragon that embodies the harsh beauty of desert environments. Flygon's ground and dragon typing gives it excellent offensive coverage and only one weakness to ice before Fairy type's introduction, while its levitate ability grants immunity to ground type moves despite being a ground type itself, creating interesting strategic options and allowing it to avoid damage from Earthquake even when grounded by moves like Gravity. The controversy around Flygon's lack of Mega Evolution stems from Generation 6 giving Mega forms to several Hoenn Pokémon, including Salamence and Altaria, while leaving Flygon without any new form, despite fan requests, and later interviews with Game Freak staff suggested that designers struggled to create a satisfying Mega Flygon concept, ultimately abandoning the idea rather than implementing something that felt forced or uninspired. Haxorus represents pure dragon-type power without the secondary typing that defines most other dragon types, and this singular focus creates a Pokémon whose identity centers entirely on physical offense, with base 147 attack, making it the highest attack stat of any non-legendary dragon type and one of the highest attack stats in the entire game. The design emphasizes weaponized tusks that can cut through steel beams, creating a visual identity around these blade-like appendages that extend from its jaw. And Pokédex entries describe these tusks as the source of Haxorus's power, though they break easily and do not regrow, adding a layer of vulnerability to what otherwise appears as pure, offensive dominance. Moldbreaker, Haxorus's ability, allows its moves to ignore abilities like Levitate, Sturdy, and Wonder Guard, giving it the capacity to hit Pokémon that would normally be immune or protected. And this ability made Haxorus particularly valuable in competitive formats where breaking through specific defensive cores required ignoring protective abilities. Despite lacking the versatility of pseudo-legendary Pokémon, or the defensive utility of dual-typed dragons, Haxorus has maintained a consistent competitive presence through its simple but effective role as a powerful physical attacker that can break walls and eliminate threats with choice. Band-boosted attacks, or set up sweeps with Dragon Dance, representing the idea that sometimes focusing on one thing and doing it exceptionally well is more valuable than trying to fill multiple roles adequately. The impact of Fairy type on Dragon types cannot be overstated, as Pokémon like Hydreigon that were OU staples immediately dropped to lower tiers. Dragon Dance sweeps became significantly riskier, with Fairy types able to completely wall Dragon Stab attacks, and team building shifted to require answers for the new Fairy threats that could invalidate Dragon-heavy strategies. Mega Evolution, also introduced in Generation 6, provided some Dragon types with new tools to adapt, with Mega Salamence, Mega Garchomp, Mega Rayquaza, and Mega Altaria, gaining enhanced stats and new abilities. Though as discussed earlier, some of these mega forms were controversial in their implementation. The pseudo-legendary tradition, which established that nearly every generation should include a dragon type with 600 base stat total, that evolves late and represents the region's ultimate non-legendary Pokémon, has continued with only Generation 2 as the exception, and this consistency has made pseudo-legendary dragon types one of the franchise's most reliable design patterns, with Dragonite, Salamence, Garchomp, Hydreigon, Goodra, Kommo-o, and Dragapult each representing their generation's approach to what a dragon-type powerhouse should be. Modern dragon types have explored increasingly creative type combinations and design philosophies, with Duraludon combining Steel and Dragon to create a skyscraper-inspired Pokémon that resists Fairy-type moves, Noivern using Flying and Dragon with high speed to function as a sound-based Wyvern, Baxcalibur bringing Dragon and Ice typing with a Theropod dinosaur design, and unusual dragons like Turtonator, Drampa, and Alolan Exeggutor, demonstrating that dragon-type classification can apply to blast turtles, elderly serpents, and tropical palm trees when the design concept is strong enough. Regional variants have allowed Game Freak to reimagine existing dragon types through different environmental pressures, with Hisuian Goodra adding Steel type and a protective shell, while Paradox Pokémon in Generation 9 introduced Koraidon and Miraidon as the first box legendary mascots with dual dragon and fighting, or dragon and electric typings, representing prehistoric and futuristic interpretations of dragon mythology filtered through motorcycle aesthetics. The dragon type's cultural legacy extends beyond competitive viability or design creativity, as it represents mastery, power, and the endgame content that players work toward throughout their journey. with dragon-type specialists like Lance, Claire, Drake, Iris, and Rayhan, serving as late-game challenges that test whether players have developed teams capable of handling the franchise's most iconic type. The balance changes, the fairy type introduction, the constant evolution of what dragon types can be. All of this reflects a design philosophy that recognizes dragon types must remain special without dominating the metagame, powerful without being unbeatable, and rare enough that encountering one still carries weight even as the total number of dragon-type species approaches 100 across all forms and regional variants. And as you drift off tonight, surrounded by the stories of these dragons, from the gentle Dragonite to the overwhelming Rayquaza, from the tragic Kyurem to the swift Dragapult, remember that power and rarity create responsibility, that dominance invites counters, and that the most enduring legacies belong not to those who remain unchallenged, but to those who adapt, evolve, and continue to inspire wonder across generations. Rest well, and may your dreams be filled with the quiet flight of dragons across starlit skies.